everyone, and thanks for joining us for this first episode of Artists on the Web Initiative, the video cast. And I got to tell you, I'm so excited about having this first guest. As you probably know, there's 3 goals for this program. And the overarching goal is that we create basically a basis for you to make your artist career sustainable. And part of that is coming up with the business mindset strategy, and I'm sure we'll hear quite a bit about that term later, but and I could really think of no better person to speak to about such things than someone who, and I hope you don't mind, Russ, that I'm going to call you this, someone I consider a mentor for me, Dr. Russ Barnes. And he's more than just some dude with business ideas and things like that. He's a retired colonel with the Air Force. He's also an author, and I'm going to show off my copy of his book, Small Business for Service Members book. And actually, let me share the screen for one moment, because that book is available here on Amazon. Let me get, there we go. Okay, it's on Amazon, and I don't know, Russ, if you were aware of this, but it's a #1 bestseller on Amazon.
I absolutely was, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course you were. And then we have a website for Russ. His company is called Systro Solutions. And as you see here, I love this term, purposefully profitable. And he teaches you how you can become that way through an assessment, which I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about later. And so really, you know, this, I really consider this a complete package, because not only are you going to have a chance to absorb information about keeping that business mindset, you're also going to get to hear a really intelligent guy. So without further ado, Mr. Russ, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's a great new year. We're happy about that, and some additions to the family, a great holiday. So really pleased to be on this show at this time.
And I'm really pleased to have you. I really thank you for making the time to join me on this. And so I guess you know, I mentioned that you're a retired Air Force colonel, and
Yes.
you know, the interesting thing to me, because I've had family members in the military, and a lot of times when people retire the military, they tend to want to take a consultant role that has something to do with security or, you know, so on and so forth. But you chose a different path. You wanted to get a doctorate in business. So I'm curious, like, what interested you in getting a doctorate in business?
So when I retired from the military after 27 years of service, I was really fully ready to sort of leave that corporate environment. And I had one goal in mind at that time, and that was that I wanted freedom. And freedom meant to me that I didn't want to work for anybody who could control my decision making, who could control my ability to earn, who could put a cap on the types of things that I really felt that I could do and that I wanted to do, but within the framework of the military, I wasn't able to do because they had you know, resource limitations. You know, they had higher guidance that was directing, you know, what we could and could not do. And I wanted that freedom to just be on my own, to be able to make decisions on my own. And after trying a few different things, it became obvious to me that becoming a business owner, an entrepreneur, was the most controllable path that I could take. So the initial thing was, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I really didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know how to execute it. So I was starting from square zero. And one of the things that I noticed first off the bat was that in the military, we had to be able to create structures and implement structures to help our decision making because we couldn't get it wrong. we have to work with what we know and what we have. But if we got national security wrong, then we'd be speaking Russian or Arabic or something else other than English, because we would have lost our freedom. And when I started down this path in business, I didn't see that. I didn't see a structure for business owners starting out that would help me to think effectively about what I'm doing. And as well as I do, that in business, every day is a different day. Even though you have your area of expertise, there are people who've been down this path, many times before you. You're still kind of figuring it out from a day-to-day basis, on a day-to-day basis. And so I said, it was a big challenge for me. So my first 3 years in business, I was just learning, and I was trying to understand my capability. I was trying to understand the environment. I was trying to put together the full picture of what it means to be in business and how do you succeed. So after about 3 years in business, I started to see where people were struggling in this, especially early age, what I now call the pre-profitability stage. Didn't call it that back then, but I started to see that people were doing what they were being taught to do and what they were told to do and what they were coached to do, but they still weren't making that money that they expected to make when they started on that path. So it was a unresolvable problem for me at that time. And it just came a point where I realized that this idea of organization development, this idea of strategy, this idea of a purpose and intent was something that was missing. And when I look back on my 30 plus year military career, you have my ROTC in there, and it's 31 years actually of time in the service. And even before that, as a young man, I was always a strategic thinker. And I said, let me see if I can't bring my experience in strategy to the small business community. But I had been trained and experienced in high level strategy, really good at high level strategy. But a solopreneur can't implement high level strategy. So then I had to figure out, how do I bring high level strategy down to that individual who has to make all the decisions with little to no resources and little to no help? How do I bring it down to that level? That was the catalyst for me going into the PhD program, because I had the means to be able to go into this program. And so I was very selective about the program I chose. I chose a PhD in organization development with a focus on organization design. And there was only one school in the country that I found at that time that had that program, and that was Benedictine University in Illinois. So although I'm in Florida, I flew back and forth to Illinois to go to school for 2 years until I completed that coursework. And then the third year was my dissertation. And then, of course, I had to defend. So that was the whole intent behind that. And my dissertation was organization design for small business. And the sub category of it was a discovery of business fundamentals for executing a purposeful path to profitability. And you may not be able to see it, but this is a copy of my dissertation. It probably doesn't come through pretty clearly because of my background, but
yeah, but it's very thick.
Yes, it is. It is. It's a very thick volume, because I did what they call a mixed methods study. So I did quantitative and qualitative, which is really challenging. But I really wanted to get into the foundational, fundamental that would help people who didn't have experience to be able to think like an experienced business owner. So that was the biggest challenge, and that was what I was able to accomplish by going into the PhD program. And I'm gonna stop my background for a minute, because I really do want you to be able to see this. And so this was the dissertation. I completed the course in 2019. And yes, it was a very, very comprehensive and intensive study. I actually studied 75 business owners who built their companies from $0 to $100 million in annual revenue. And I focused on what they did in that pre-profitability state. And from that, I pulled out I had some criteria, some guidelines that they all had to meet. Every single one of them had to meet it. And from that, I was able to pull out those basic frameworks. And on top of that, I built the foundation of Systro Solutions. And we'll probably get into some more conversation about what Systro Solutions provides, and that will all be based upon what I was able to pull out of my PhD work. The
Yeah,
long answer to a short question,
no, actually,
but
well, you know what? There's a term that you used earlier, and I gotta say, it really encapsulate my image of you. What you said, comprehensive. You're definitely a very thorough person in how you go about everything. You have a methodology, and I really enjoy that. And that's kind of a good segue actually into my next question. And before I go into that, I'm going to mention I realize that on my end the sound quality isn't very good for the viewers. I apologize. I'm in a room where the ceiling is kind of high, and so it's probably a little echoey. So I'll try to work on that in the future. But let me get to the second question. So artists, and there's another term you used earlier, freedom, having the freedom to do things. And, having been a performing artist for more than half of my life, I enjoyed having a certain freedom to things, and that whole creative mindset. So I guess what I want to ask is, and this is an opinion, so I don't want you to feel like this is something that everybody has to think this. Anyway, so do you feel that having a strategic mindset gets in the way of having a creative one?
it absolutely does not. It facilitates that because my definition of strategy is simply this: how do you get from where you are to where you want to be? That's it. And you'll also find that in my framework, I strive hard to simplify because it's easy to make things complicated, but it's really challenging to simplify. And the best way for people to take action is if it's simple enough to execute. When it gets complicated, it gets overwhelming and it just gets to be too much to make a decision on what you want to do. And there have been studies that said the more options you give an individual, the more difficult it is for that individual to make a decision.
Mm.
So the strategic mindset, if you use that simplified definition of strategy is how to get from where you are to where you want to be, then it makes sense within the artistic environment. Because when you're an artist, whether you're creating a piece of music or whether you're creating a something on a canvas or even sculpture. Somebody said, and I apologize for not remembering who this was, but they said, when I take a block of stone, I don't try to make whatever it is. I just chip away the parts that don't fit because they have that vision of what it's going to look like at the end. You have a vision kind of what you want your music to sound like at the end. You have a style, you have a personality that you put into your music. And so you're moving from where you are to where you want to be. And you can execute that definition in a variety of ways. You can say, this is a definition, this is what I want that to look like. Or you can say, I'm here and I'm going to proceed down this path until I get to what it should look like. So some people will say, well, I don't know what it is, but I'll know it when I see it. I know it when I'll hear it. And so the whole idea is directionality. And when you have directionality, you become more effective in what you're doing. So strategy is just all about um, decision making and purpose, intent, and knowing where you're going. So No, and one of the things that I also say with this idea of strategy and strategy development is we want to remove the guesswork, but we want to retain the creativity. So when I work with clients, I say, you're the expert, you're the musician, you're the maestro, you're the creative mind behind what you do. I'm not. So I can't possibly tell you how to do your thing. But what I can do is help you put that within a framework. So again, you're not guessing on the business side. We have, you use the word method, and I am very methodical in my approach because I cannot teach you how to think the way I think. It's taken me 40 years to get to this way of thinking. It's taken me a ton of books. If you saw when I took down my logo, you see I have shelves full of books. I love to read. I can't transfer that to you. But what I've done is taken my thought process, I've broken it down into an assessment and 5 worksheets. And if you work through those, you will have gotten the advantage and the benefit of thinking the way I do without having to become a strategic thinker in the way that I am. So hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, superbly, actually, it's funny. I was kind of baiting you a little bit because I had a feeling that was going to be how you would answer that, and that's perfect. I mean, because it's like you said, you're kind of providing a guideline, and then it's up to the person to have the creativity to come up with what they need to do to follow that path on their own. So I think
And
that's yeah. Oh,
the
no, no,
thing that
go ahead.
excites me most, the thing that excites me the most is to see that when someone I'm working with understands that the framework is just a framework, a worksheet is just a worksheet. It's not going to give them the right answer, but what it does is it gives them the best answers for them under the circumstances. And so when they realize they can use this tool to enhance their creativity and yet not feel like they're missing out. Oh, I, I, I can't do this and I can't do that. And this person gave me this opportunity, they gave me that opportunity, and I just can't do it all. When they start working through this framework and they have their directionality and they know kind of what they want it to look like at the end, it's a lot easier to say no. It's a lot easier to say, hey, you know what, that's a great idea, but that's not fitting where I'm going. Yeah, that's not on my path. And if you get off your path, you can go, oh man, I'm headed in the wrong direction. I need to make a correction. But now you have a path that you can correct back to because in your mind, it's your path. So it's it's amazing and it's so inspiring when somebody begins to realize that and say, okay, now I am in control. And Systro Solutions' goal is to have you in control. So I love that part of
That's excellent. I love that myself. And
it.
I want to touch on your book a little bit. So a subtitle of the book is 15 Things You Need to Know to Be Purposefully Profitable. And
Yes,
now I don't want to give spoilers to all 15, but there are three terms in there that I wanted to throw at you. And so like can you explain the meaning and importance of these three terms? And the first one is one I believe is a reason I had a harder time in my music career than I needed to. I had a pretty successful career, but I think this first term, if I understood it, I would have done better. So the first term is team building. The second one is business model. And the third one is organization. So what's the importance of those three and can you explain their meaning?
absolutely. The first one is key and critical because we are limited and linear human beings by design. Um, we have time because it clicks along because time defines our day. There are only 24 hours in a day, and we can't change that. So because of that, we have to understand what our strengths are, our skills, our talents, our abilities, what makes us tick, what makes us motivated and energized. And we're best when we stay within the boundaries of what we do best and what we love to do. So what about those weaknesses? And early on, I really had a problem when people would say, you need to work on your weakness. You need to put effort and time into working on your weaknesses. And I used to think to myself, what more miserable way of life can you create for yourself than to work on the things that you hate to do, that you're not good at doing, that you don't want to do? Um, and you spend all your time on that. My thing was, I want to spend all the time on the things I really do well and make those things better. So the team part comes in, because there are other people who are really good at the things that you hate to do, the things you don't want to do, the things you can't do. And, and so if you align yourself and you continue to align yourself with people who fill your gaps, who do the things that really well and love to do the things that you don't want to do, you build a team of people like that. That is a very inspiring, motivating, self-supporting, self-sustaining environment to be in. And it's so much fun because everybody is making a contribution. They feel in their own self-worth, their own sense of value and contribution to what you want to do. And the whole big key to team is that you all have to be moving in the same direction. So then that goes back to strategy. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? And if everybody has a sense, and you're not always going to have a very clear, written out, specific, strict goal, because that doesn't work either. The environment changes too rapidly for you to have something that is that strict that you can't deviate from your path. We want to take the guesswork out, yes, but we want to keep the creativity in. So if I'm saying I'm going to take a trip from Florida to New York, I'll say, okay, I'm going to New York for a vacation, for a holiday, but I'm not just going to go to Manhattan. I may go to Brooklyn. I may go to the Bronx. I may go to Staten Island. I may do a lot of things while I'm there. So we want to keep that sort of thing, a little fluid, a little bit flexible, but we really want to know we're going to New York. We're not going to Atlanta. We're not going to California. We're not going to Oregon. We're not going to Maine. We're going to New York. So we know we have a sense of the destination. So that's important. And that's really important for the team piece of it. But the whole idea behind team is you cannot do it alone. You absolutely cannot do it alone. And so how, when, where do you bring in other people who you can collaborate with, who you can coordinate with, even who you can compete with? Because competition is good, when it's geared towards being better. Iron sharpens iron. So so there's a place for competition. You just don't want it to be negative, destructive, cutthroat competition. That doesn't help anybody. But yeah, but that positive competition has to be in there as well. So you want to have that team. And where do you find them? How do you find them? That's sort of that's a stage 2 part of what I do within the Systro program. Stage 1 is all about revenue strategy. Stage 2 is all about stability. And in stability, we do take a look at how you're going to scale. Are you going to scale with people, labor, or are you going to scale with technology? Those are the 2 primary ways, and some measure of combination between the 2. But some people don't want to have employees. So how do you build a team when you don't want to have necessarily employees? So that's the team part. That's very key. That's very important. Any comments on that part?
No, not really. I mean, I feel like you hit all the important points of why I chose that term. And
Right.
for me, like I said, and part of my failure in team building back then was I was very bad at delegating because I was so used to doing things on my own. And that's what made me think about that term, because I know that a lot of artists are really used to doing things on their own. And so
Yes.
you really hit the nail on the head on that. And what about
And,
business model?
but let me just say something again about artists and this idea of team,
Yeah.
because An artist is good at what they do: music, art, drawing, painting, sculpting, whatever their art may be. They're really good at that. But on the business side, you need to have support. You need to have other people supporting you. And it doesn't necessarily, a team doesn't necessarily mean that you are the CEO or you're the boss or you're the one who's in charge and you have to tell everyone what to do and make sure that they do it. That is one approach. And if that's your personality, that's the best approach. You're the one, you look at somebody like, like a Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, LeBron, all these guys who have been leaders in their basketball teams and quest for championships, and they will say, man, I was all over every detail. If somebody didn't perform at the level they were supposed to perform, I was in their face and I was on them and I was making sure that they stepped up to the plate because everybody had. So this was their personality. It was natural. It came out and it manifested itself in the type of success that they were looking for. So if that's your personality, don't run away from it. Don't say, I don't want to be that bad leader kind of person. Hey, you got to do what you want to do. But there is another way. And the approach that I took was I said, I love to have a harmonized team, a team of people who are all bringing their best talent to the table day by day. So I don't have to motivate them. I don't have to drive them. I don't have to make sure that they are meeting all the details because they're doing it on their own, and we're just simply a force moving together in the same direction. So I will say that for someone like an artist, if we want to talk team, I talk about 6 advisors that every business owner should have. You should have a health advisor, somebody who's going to let you know when you're working yourself to death, and somebody that you'll trust that when they tell you you're working yourself to death, you're going to take some action and listen to them and change something so that you don't do that. You need to have a wealth advisor, somebody who's more than just selling you insurance policies or selling you investments and things like that, but they understand your wealth situation and your wealth goals, and they're guiding you. They're an advisor. And then you want to have the big 4, which is a banker, an attorney, an insurance agent, and then the other one is an attorney. Yeah, an accountant, an attorney, a banker, and an insurance advisor. So you want to have those 4 in your corner as well. And now you're not going to tell them what to do, but you're going to let them know what your situations and circumstances are, and then they're going to bring in the expertise that they need, that you need to help you move along, to the financial outcomes that you're going for. So that's another way to build a team, but it's not you necessarily being in charge. You think about a band, Chanel, in a band, you're not telling everybody how to play their instrument. You telling them what you are kind of coordinating on what this piece, you want it to sound like, and you give them the definition of strategy, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. You say, hey, this is kind of the type of music. Somebody writes the lyrics, somebody, creates the melodies, and everybody contributes, and at the end you have this masterpiece that came out of it. So that's a team. So, be flexible in terms of how you're thinking about this concept of team, and don't lock yourself into a specific box that this is what a team has to look like. So delegation, yeah. And I'm sure you built a team, because even as you were going along, I'm sure you brought people in who were able to help you to build. But now we want to talk a little bit about team we want to add the concept of team on the business side. So you have the art side, we need to add the concept of team. How do you build a business oriented and a business focused team? That's kind of what we're talking about here right now.
Exactly. And there was a word you said that I loved, because it reinforces part of the answer you gave to the previous question. So you said flexibility, and flexibility yields creativity. So I love that. And so the second term I mentioned was business model. That
Right.
kind of stuck out at me too in the book. So what's your meaning of that, and why is that important?
Yeah, it's critically important, and it's the missing link for most business owners when they start out. Unfortunately, we're taught to do business backwards. We're told when we start out to register our business as an entity. So you're going to set up as an LLC or C corporation, S corporation, something along those lines. and that is really designed to do two things. It's designed to protect your assets, and it's designed to give you a tax structure. So how is your business going to be taxed? And that's primarily what it's designed. The reason most people do it because they feel like it gives them legitimacy as a business. You know, I have an LLC, I'm a business, but what they are is they're a business entity, but they're not yet a business enterprise. And I'm gonna come back and tell you why I said that. The next thing we do is they say, you know, you need to do some type of business development. And how many people execute that is then they go to they join a networking group, or they start doing some marketing, they start doing, you know, all these things. The challenge is that you haven't really sold anything yet. So you really don't know who your customers or clients are. So it's really hard to get somebody else to sell on your behalf through a networking group when you can't explain how that part works. And then it's about writing a business plan. And the most important things in the business plan are your management team. And we just talked a little bit about team. It is your market, who's buying from you, and how large is that market, and how much money can be generated in that market. And then it also has to do with projection. How much did you sell this year? How much do you expect to sell next year? How much you going to sell the year after that? How is this company going to grow from a revenue perspective? And so what happens is people do that. They set up their business as an entity. They they write a business plan, and then they do some business development, and they do that for a couple of years, and they fail because my definition of profitability, everybody's definition of profitability is income exceeding your expenses. So when the first thing you do is set up a business entity, you've already created an expense for which you have no revenue to pay for it. You write this business plan, you don't have a team yet, you haven't built it, you don't have a understanding of the market yet because you haven't done any customer discovery, and you don't have any projections because you haven't sold anything yet. So it's really hard to write a business plan when you don't have those three key critical pieces of information. And so then when you go out to do some type of business development, you can't explain to someone who your customer is and how they can recognize a great customer for you out there in the wild. But if you say, hey, my customer is somebody who has, 3 kids, they've got a job generating, making $200,000 in income. And how do you know that? Nobody's going to tell you. It's, oh, there's a client. There's a client for Chanel. They just told me they have 3 kids. They're making 2. Nobody's going to tell you that. So the business model is a piece that's missing. And the business model is taking your most profitable product, connecting it with your most profitable customer, and that equals a revenue generating activity. So we never get to that. And so after a couple of years, you quit. So I flip it. And so the first thing we do is we work on the business model. What is your product? We work on that, and we make sure we have clarity on what it is you're selling. I had a big problem with that when I started because I had all the value, but I couldn't understand why nobody was hiring, why nobody was calling me for my expertise and paying me for my knowledge and my skill and my experience, until I realized I didn't have a product. I didn't have a way for them to be able to see what it was that I was providing and what it was going to cost them. And so my very first product was that book that we were talking about, Small Business for Service Members. So that was my very first product. And then I started building products beyond that. So the business model is so important. And once you have your business model, then you can go out and you can do business development, because you can say, this is my avatar. These are the people who buy from me. This is what they buy from me. This is how much I charge them. And you go into that networking environment, and it's not just about standing up making a witty little 30-second commercial. It's really about letting people know how they can represent you. So you're building a sales force, and it's much more effective. Now, once you've been selling something, now it becomes a whole lot easier to go write a business plan, because you can say, these are the people who are helping me. These are my suppliers. These are my vendors. These are my marketing people. These are the people who are helping me. this is the market, and this is who I'm selling into, and this is how big the market is, and this is how many people are buying from me. And then you can begin making projections, because you can say, oh, I only sold $40 this year, but next year I'm going to sell, $400, and then the next year I'm going to sell $4,000, because you now can see how your revenue is going to grow. So now the business plan becomes a lot easier to write, and then the business entity becomes important, because now you have assets to protect. You have some intellectual property that needs to be protected. You have some equipment that may need to be protected. And then on the other side of it, you have money and you need to pay taxes. And
I
so now
love
you want to
it.
have that business and you're going to help you.
You're basically saying a lot of people put the cart before the horse.
They do. They do. They do. And there's logic behind why that has been done in the past, but we're moving into a future now that is different. And because it's different and information flows so freely and so rapidly, that we have to move a little bit quicker in terms of how we process information and how we move through this process. Because if you go look at, I'm here in Florida, we're here in Florida. If you go look at sunbiz.org, where people register their businesses, probably a good 80% of those businesses that have been registered are inactive, because it's the first thing people did. And then as they moved along down that path, they found out that they really didn't have a great business concept. They didn't have a great business idea. They were using a business opportunity, but they hadn't tied it to a problem that people were willing to pay for the solution. And so they never got to that point where they created a business model. And so, so they abandoned that, that LLC or that S corporation that they created, because they put it first instead of putting. And now this is not a long process either. This is not something like, 3 years down the line, you're creating your LLC, because it took you all that time. We're maybe talking about 3 to 6 months. You get your business model, you're going to know pretty quickly if your business model is going to produce any revenue. And if your business model doesn't produce any revenue, why would you go register your company? There's nothing there. So you'll know pretty quickly. You'll get out there in the community and do some customer discovery. So you'll know pretty quickly if people want to buy from you. So we're only talking maybe 3 to 6 months down the line before you would register your company. And in some cases, it may only be, 3 weeks to a month to get through that, because your business model kicked off so rapidly and you started generating revenue so quickly that it just makes sense to get that thing done. A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It all depends upon how rapidly your business model begins generating revenue. That's the key.
Gotcha, right. I agree with that. And the third term I was interested in is organization.
Yes. So I do two things. I do strategy development and I do organization design. Strategy development is all about progression, how to get from where you are to where you want to be, having a path. Organization design is all about frameworks and structures so that you can maximize your resources, so that you can communicate effectively with other people, and so that you can grow efficiently. Because as the process of business is a series of overcoming obstacles. As you get good at this, you're going to hit that next thing that you didn't know about. So you learn as quickly as you can, you overcome that obstacle, and as soon as you do that, you're going to hit the next one. You're not going to hit obstacle 10 without having hit 1, 2, 3 all the way up. So when you have a structure and you have a framework, you can address those obstacles more rapidly. So let me give you an example. My first challenge in business would be, I had no idea how to do business. I didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial family. I didn't have any opportunities to build my own company, so I have no idea. So the first one is personal development. I have to learn about business. And once I start learning about business, then I need to understand, well, if I'm going into business, what am I going to sell? What problem am I going to solve? Who am I going to help? How am I going to generate? How am I going to create something that people are willing to pay for? So then you work on that and you get that one in place. And then the next thing is, how do I let people know that I have a solution to their problem? So as you're going down the road, as you get more information, more experience, more knowledge, you're going to then hit higher levels of challenge. And then you have to kind of learn how to overcome those things, moving forward. Building team. How do I build a team? I built a team before. You won't get to that until you have the money problem solved, because if you have no way of generating revenue, you can't pay people.
Precisely.
So you have to keep things in that sort of that right sequence, and organization gives you the sequence, and it gives you the framework that enables you to be very methodical about what you're doing, and it removes the trial and error. That's the whole thing. Is now we have a way of looking at this from a perspective of cause and effect.
Cause
I
and
do
effect.
this activity, right? If I do this activity, it should give me this effect. If it doesn't give me that effect, I go back and look at the activity and say, how do I change it? We can go back and talk about Thomas Edison. And he says, when he was creating a light bulb, he didn't see failure after failure after failure. He saw, that's another way that doesn't work. That's another way that doesn't work. That's another way that doesn't work. And he just keeps going until he finds the way that does. And I'm sure there are some parallels in music where, you try to put together a certain sequence of tones and notes and melodies and so forth, and it doesn't hit you right. So you go back and you change it, you tweak it, you modify it, but you're working towards a known. And I think that's a real key here, is you're continually working to create knowns out of unknowns. And organization helps you do that, because it takes that trial and error and reduces it, so that you have a framework that you're working through.
The one thing I really love about well, first of all, I'm really enjoying this conversation. So thanks again, Russ, for making time for this. One thing I love, and I hope the viewers will kind of catch on this, is that there's certainly a cohesion to everything that you're saying. Everything's tying to the other. So I really appreciate that, and I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because I'm gonna start kind of directing us towards your company and the assessment and that sort of thing, because I think those are very important things to kind of dive into. But I guess as a segue into that, what made you choose helping business owners that are pre-profitable? Like, it always struck me, as a former career military person, you were serving the country. And by the way, thank you for your service.
Thank you, appreciate that.
But in a roundabout way, by wanting to help business owners who are pre-profitable, you're still kind of serving the country. So was that the genesis of you choosing that market, or what was it?
Yes. My ultimate goal is to help 600,000 micro business owners become purposefully profitable. So I'm starting from the end, and I'm going to talk about this from the end back to where it really started. The idea of helping 600,000 and where that number came from is I wanted to have a positive impact on the economic development of communities. I also, years ago, saw that we were going to find ourselves as humans in a situation where we were going to have to be able to use our skills, talents, and abilities to generate the income we needed to support our families. My vision about that was that it was going to be based upon automation, and that even white collar jobs were going to become, to a certain degree, automated, and people were going to lose their livelihood because it was being done by something that was far more efficient than they could ever do. So I had that vision in mind in the beginning, and I said, okay, when we start to find ourselves in that situation, how are we going to approach that? How are we going to execute that? So So that was, so that was in my mind, starting out. And then as we kind of back that off, it becomes this idea of, um, you know, what's the key? What is the big key there? And the idea of thinking about what you're doing in such a way that you can be effective and efficient moving forward became part of how do we make that happen. Um, bring me back to the point. You
Yeah,
wanted me
it
to.
was right. It was about organization. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Why were you choosing the pre-profitability stage? Uh,
So so as I so having an economic impact on the development, a positive impact on the economic development of communities was important. It was a motivator. But as I started out on my journey, and I realized that there weren't the frameworks in place to help me think effectively about what I was doing. Um, and so I went into business trying to figure that out. Um, I had a leather restoration and vinyl repair company. I joined networking group, and when I was in that group, I started to see that there were other people struggling the same way I was. I was generating maybe about $40,000 in revenue, but it wasn't what I had anticipated I was going to be able to generate when I started down that path. And I was doing everything that the coaches were telling me to do. I was doing everything that I was being taught to do, and I was taking a lot of trainings too. And I saw a lot of other people doing the right things or doing what they were taught and just weren't making the money. And it's a very painful place to be. And that really hit me in my heart is, man, they're doing the right things. Why aren't they making the money? And I just couldn't resolve that in my brain. And it became an obsession for me to try to figure out um, how to solve that problem. The other part of that equation is nobody was really willing to help them on a large scale, because how do you build a profitable business working with people who by definition don't have any money? And so they either had to make the trade-off of, I'm going to pay for this training program, I'm going to pay for this coach, I'm going to pay for this, but the trade-off is I don't get to eat, or the trade-off is, I'm going to have to um, not pay my bills in order to pay this, with the hope that this is going to help me make more money, so then I can turn around and pay my bills. So it's a chicken and egg, and it's just such a painful place to live. So I said I want to be one who can help them right in the early stages generate revenue, so then they have choice. Because once you have that controllable revenue stream and you can scale it, now you have choice. Now you can hire people to come in and help you. Now you can pay for the materials that you need. Now you can pay for the expertise and the support that you need without feeling the stress of it. So that became my challenge is how do I help people in the pre-profitability stage, because no one is really helping them. And I remember sitting in a presentation, and a lady says, I interviewed 8 billionaires and I asked them the question, what was at the foundation of their ability to to generate the type of revenue that they generate into their companies in? She said she interviewed the business owners independently, but she said each one of them said, well, it was organized people and organized money. These are the things that helped us, to be successful. Organized people and organized money. So this goes back to a question you asked earlier. Where does organization fit? So what I found myself in the situation of is I didn't have people and I didn't have money. So I had nothing to organize. So the way my brain works, I said, okay, I don't have people and I don't have money, but what do I have? And I had time and I had thought. I said, so if I organize my thought and I organize my time, then I can turn that into people and money. And then I can be in the mainstream of how other people who have generated large revenues into their companies, now I can follow their models. Now I can follow their experiences and learn from them. But how do I get that traction? I have to be able to organize my thought and I have to be able to organize my time in order to be able to do that.
Right.
So that's why I
Wow.
work in the pre-profitability stage, because I feel like they have to be taught differently. What's being taught doesn't work, and we have to teach differently so that then they can get to the point where they can take advantage of the small business administration, small business development centers, SCORE counselors, all of those free resources that are out there to help them. In order for those organizations to help them, they need to have people and they need to have money.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, so that that's kind of I guess a lead in into, because I mentioned earlier that I wanted to get into what your company does, but
Mhm.
also the assessment. There's an assessment that people can take that can help
Yes,
them come up with a path, so to say.
that's right.
So Systro Solutions, what is it?
So, you want to have something that's descriptive. And Sistro, I like hidden messages too. I'm just a big fan of hidden messages. So Sistro is actually a combination word that stands for systems, strategies, and organization. System, strategy, and organization, Sistro. Um, or if you look at the back of my business card, at the bottom, the little line down there says strategic organization solution, which is SOS. If you take the lesson, the letters, help. I'm there to help. But Sistro, I originally started out as a Sistro consulting because people didn't really understand what I was trying to do initially, but I never characterized myself as a coach or a consultant. I teach strategy development. That's what I do. And so Systro Solutions is really then focused on, how do we collaboratively co-create the solutions that people are going to be willing to pay you for as you grow your company. So that's where Systro Solutions comes in. That's really what that title means, the name of the
Mhm.
company means.
And as part of, if someone's looking to gain some help from you, uh, there's a whole program and system that you have in
Right.
place
Yes,
to help them out. But
right,
primary to that is first you need to take the assessment test,
right,
which I mentioned I showed earlier on your website that people
right,
can click on. So
right.
and actually I took the assessment, by the way, so
You
I can
did,
attest
you
to
did.
the thoroughness of it. But I guess describe the, I guess, the point of the assessment, and how did it come about?
Mhm. Um, the point of the assessment is tied into the definition of strategy, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. So the first part of that definition is, where are you? And the assessment evolved to answer that question and to help me help other people answer that question for themselves. And remember, my thing is to remove the guesswork, but to retain the creativity. So as I was trying to get people to see for themselves where they were and communicate where they were to me, I started looking at the successful business owners and I came up with a series of questions. Okay, um, do you know why you're in business?
Mm,
Have you been in business for more than 2 years? Um, do you have a mentor? Do you know your best way to learn? Do you have a reading program? All of these things, if you go look at successful business owners and you listen to them talk about how they became successful, these are all things that these successful business owners talk about over and over and over. You hear the same thing from Warren Buffett. You hear the same thing from, Sir, um, you know,
Elon Musk or
Elon Musk, all these folks, Bill Gates, all these folks who have created huge companies, you know, all of them, even back to Ford and way back in history. In any books you read, they have these same things. So I put these into a framework that I created during my PhD program, which I call the levels of progression. I map these to personal development, product development, business development, organization development. And so when you take the assessment, you work down through these questions, And when you're done with, they're yes and no. It's 50 yes or no questions. And when you get done, they're mapped to this progression model. And then you can sit back from that model and you can say, oh, I need a whole lot of work in personal development because I have a lot of no's here. I have a lot of red in here. I need to focus in and get this stuff solidified so that now I I know that I'm personally developed to be able to be in business. That kind of evolved too. I'm going to take a little segue. That kind of evolved too because when I created the model initially, it started with product development because I thought that was the first thing based upon what I'd been learning. And then as I was working with clients, I started to realize they're not even personally ready to go into business yet. So then I added the personal development piece. So now people can say, oh, I'm not personally ready, but if I go down and work through these questions and I answer these questions for myself, then if I turn these reds to green, then I will be personally ready to then go into the more complex aspects of business. So then you have how much work did you do on the product development? Are you solving a painful, urgent problem for which people are willing to pay for the solution? And one of the things that happens is people get stuck in the product development because it makes you feel like you're working. It's a lot of fun. You're doing very creative things in the product development side of it. You really want to build a product that sells itself because you don't want to sell. And so you get stuck in that product development, trying to make it perfect and more perfect and more perfect, but you're making it perfect for you. And by the time you get done making it perfect for you, nobody else wants it because you haven't tied it to solving their problem. You've only made it pretty for you. So when you take the assessment and you look and you see reds in personal development, and you see reds in platform development, and you see a whole bunch of green in product development, it tells you right away, you don't need to do any more product development. You need to start getting into platform development where you're letting people know that you have this solution available. So that's one way you can step back from it, but then you can really dig down into each individual question. And then that helps you decide where to put your effort, your energy, your resources, so that you can be very methodical and you can quantify the work that you do. If you're putting work into that platform development, you can say, how am I doing that? Am I presenting on a stage? And when I do a presentation on a stage, how many clients do I get at it? Am I doing social media? And when I put a post out on Facebook or LinkedIn, am I getting any clients out of that? Am I putting out posters, buying billboard time, doing advertising? And how is each one of these bringing client into my book of business? It becomes more easily measurable. And now you're not wasting, as much time and money. So that's how the assessment is executed. And the majority of people who have taken that assessment have said, man, just by taking that assessment, my entire thought process about how to go about building my company to become a profitable enterprise is increased.
Yeah, I definitely had that feeling. One thing, the first thing that came to my mind after taking the assessment was, it really made me realize like there are certain things I hadn't thought about, and I thought I was thinking about everything, and so the whole process of I guess ingesting the fact that there are certain things that you just sometimes you don't think about, or you can't put yourself in that place. And with that theme, so now, so this will actually be the last question. Like, and I want to try to put you in, okay, so the whole premise for the video was to get artists to put themselves in that place of thinking business. So
Right.
I'm going to flip it a little bit and put you in the place of being an artist. And so you, as an artist, what would be a few steps that you would take to create a path for a successful or more important, well, I guess I was going to say more importantly, sustainable, but really sustainable is being successful.
Right,
So
correct.
so if you were an artist, what would be a few steps you would take to try to get yourself on that path?
Mhm. Um, the first thing is to really put in a lot of thought in terms of your business model. Um, what are you creating? What value does it have? Whose desire are you, whose needs are you serving? What does that value proposition look like? And then how are you creating, how are you collecting the revenue? What does that look like? Um, in many cases, I start out talking about a problem. What problem are you solving? And even when you're creating art and you're creating music, um, you're solving someone's problem. There's something that they want that they cannot, will not do for themselves. So when you're creating music, I I'm not a musician, so I can't create music for myself. I love music. I love listening to music. Um, music evolves. Music makes you feel a certain way. Some people they get up and they listen to that same song every morning so they could get motivated to go do that job that they have to do. So when you think about why you're creating this art, what are you contributing in terms of making someone feel better? So if you look at it, I solve the problem of people who want to feel better and can't make it happen for themselves. And when they listen to my music, they feel better about themselves. So if that's the problem that you're solving, now you can start to look at, the solution of the music and then the product. And the product, it's an album, it's a, video, it's whatever it is. Now the next key, most important thing becomes how do you connect that to dollars? How do you create it in such a way that people are going to pay you? That's where a lot of the creativity comes in. Because you remember way back when, if you weren't with a record label, there was no way for you to make money. But then all of a sudden social media came along, and
Mhm.
now you could build up a following of people. You could get people to make donations. Hey, I want to do this album. You could do a Indiegogo campaign. There became other ways that you could very creatively take that art, put it out in the community, and have the community compensate you for the value that you put out there. Um,
Mm.
there's a Patreon. You can set up a Patreon, page, and people can make donations. And if they made a donation, then they could get, you can give them something. So that's the next key piece is then how do you connect that in some way to dollars? So
Mm.
so you really would need to take a moment at that time as you're creating your art to study um, how other artists have made money. And that's the big key that I want to say here is, you don't need to take business courses and business classes and understand, how to do all those kind of things. What you need to understand is what has traditionally been the way of generating revenue, how has that changed, and what might that look like in the future? Prince was real good at that. He saw the handwriting on the wall when he said, hey, we're going to have a problem getting paid for our money, paid for our music because it's going to be out there in this public domain, and people are going to be able to access it for free. So how are we going to continue to be artists and make money when it's not all about buying an album from a store anymore? People are going to be listening to it over the internet, and how do we generate revenue from that? And nobody listened to him, but he was thinking that way. He was thinking way ahead, and now you see how it's coming about. So understand the mechanisms, understand what those business models look like. Study the various business models that musicians are using, and plug yourself into the simple ones at the very beginning. Just plug yourself into the easy ones, and then as you go along, you'll be able to then get into the more complex structure. But in the start, use the easy ones.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Russ. That's an excellent answer. And uh, one thing I want to make a point about before we close everything out is for the viewers, uh, what a lot of what we're talking about. Okay, so actually, let me back up. there are times we mention sculptors, or a lot of times we mention musicians. And really the important thing to remember is that what we've talked about is fundamentals. And fundamentals are you just plug and play those into whatever the discipline would be. So I really appreciate that, Russ, how you frame everything in a way that it's applicable to any situation, because you're basically talking fundamentals. So
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah. So let me throw my last analogy in here before we close out, and that is that I was a basketball player, and this was another thing that made me shape my program the way I shaped it, which is, as a basketball player, you ask many people who play basketball, what are the fundamentals? And the majority of them will say, hey, if you can't dribble, pass, and shoot, you can't play the game. And that's what I mean by fundamentals, those basic foundational things that if you can't do these things, you can't play the game. If you can't dribble, pass, and shoot, and you're a kid on the playground, nobody's going to pick you for their team. So you need to understand those things. And then there's advanced fundamentals, then you start to get into, rebounding, you get into defending and blocking shots. But those three basic fundamentals, if you can't do those things, you're not even going to step on, nobody's going to put you on the court. So I asked myself early on, well, what are those fundamentals in business? And part of my PhD study was to ask a lot of people what those business fundamentals were, and nobody agreed. Out of like 180 people that I talked to, 54 had unique responses that were not duplicated. So somebody said this. There were 54. So 54 out of like 108 or 154.
That's
So
like half, yeah.
right. So how can you consider it a fundamental when nobody agrees on what those fundamentals are? And so that was really the key. So in my study, I came up with the three that apply to business. And of course, I didn't make these up. These emerged out of those 75 business owners that I studied. And so the basic three is selling, cultivating relationships, and research. And what I want people to do is I want them to try to rip those apart. If
I love it. Homework.
one of
I love
those,
it.
see if one of those doesn't apply. I'm gonna tell you again: selling, cultivating relationships, and research. If you can't do those three things in business, you cannot play the game. You just can't play the game.
That is an excellent way to sum it up. And I got to tell you, I got to compliment you on your analogies. I've always enjoyed when you throw analogies out. So, but yeah, thank you, Russ. I really appreciate again the time you spent. I'm sure people who will view this will gain a lot, and hopefully, my hope is that some of them will actually tap into what you have to offer through Systro Solutions, because I really think that artists, there's plenty of artists who want to have a career and I don't want to say do the right thing, but they want to follow a path that's going to be successful, but they don't know where to start, excuse me, or they don't have a framework. And this, I think, would be very, very helpful to a lot of people. So thank you again, Russ.
I want to close out too by saying this is, I said earlier that simplification, and in the pre-profitability stage, we want to be as simple as we possibly can. And therefore the simple definition, how to get from where you are to where you want to be, the simple formula, your most profitable product plus your most profitable customer equals a revenue generating activity. We want to keep these things as simple as we possibly can, the three basic fundamentals. But let's not be naive, because it's going to get more complex. But if we start out with something that's manageable and something that's we can take action on, then we can build into, so when it does get far more complex, we're ready for it and we can handle it a lot better. And we don't feel quite so overwhelmed, when we start getting into those advanced levels. So I wanted to put that piece in there because I implore you take this assessment. It will get you started. You know, Shanola and I, we have talked about a lot of things over this period of time, but take that assessment because it will get you that first piece to know where you are, and it will help you to then frame and shape your thinking as you move forward in an environment that's going to adapt very rapidly around you. One of the reasons I don't want to be a coach is because if I'm coaching you, by the time I tell you what you need to do, the environment will have changed and it will no longer be as effective as you need it to be. So please take the assessment.
Yes, indeed. Take the assessment. It definitely helped me out. It might also not be a bad idea to pick up this book here, your Small Business for Service Members book. Again, a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And visit systrosolutions.com. And as you saw when I gave a demo earlier in the beginning, there's a link there for the assessment. And I think you'll find it very informative once you take it. So thank you again, Russ. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.